Education. Mr. Carrick, would you please take the roll call?
Here. Here. Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Thank you. Please stand if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please take notice that adequate notice of this meeting was sent from the office of the Secretary of the Board on March 9, 2026 to the Maplewood and South Orange Township Clerks and the editors of the News Record, Star Ledger, Tap into Soma, and Village Green. I will now entertain a motion to enter executive session as permitted under the Open Public Meetings Act to discuss personnel, legal, and miscellaneous confidential matters. No formal action will be taken. Board Member Sackett Gable, do I have a second? Callahan, show of hands. All in favor? Okay, motion passes. The board will enter executive session at 6:33 p.m. and will be returning to public session. Any action resulting from our discussions will be taken in public session, and we'll see you back here shortly. Also, they were very loud.
They were, I noticed that when we did
Significantly.
our-
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting back to order at 7:37 PM. The board is now back in public session. Thank you for joining us tonight. Before we get to our business this evening, I want to pause for a moment because the district has suffered a loss this month. Not everyone who has attended our board meetings knows Chris Settle by name, but everyone has been greeted by him when they enter this building and met by a kind word and his unfailing smile. And when we trudged out of our building late into the evening from our meetings, Chris was still there at his guard post, keeping watch. Chris passed away not quite 2 weeks ago, very untimely. Chris was part of the 525 Academy family for a long time, and he served his district with distinction. He's left a hole in the lives of many people who loved him, including in this building and in this room. And we want to take a moment now in remembrance of him. Chris's family is collecting donations for his funeral arrangements for anyone led to give. Information is available at the back of this room, or folks can reach out to me as well.
We'll be celebrating the life of Christopher Big Gravy Settle, as we called him, one of the most passionate Bills fans around. April 2nd, 2026, at the Newborn Baptist Church, 391 Avon Avenue, Newark, New Jersey. Viewing will be from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Service will begin promptly at 11 a.m.
Tonight is our preliminary budget adoption meeting. We will hear tonight from Superintendent Bing, as well as our new interim business administrator, Frank Cervellis, who will be joining us remotely to go over our budget. Unfortunately, our business administrator, Imani Moody, is on a period of medical leave as at the beginning of this month. We wish him well. And the resolutions recognizing Mr. Cervellis as our interim BA will be addressed in the action portion of our meeting. With that, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Bing.
So tonight, we're going to be presenting our preliminary budget. Just wanted to speak briefly in regards to the work that we've been putting in. We are not there as of yet. Over the next month, we'll be doing a lot more work around this budget. revising and refining it as we move forward. We'll be as transparent as possible with that, utilizing our website to make sure everybody has the same information. So the development of this year's budget has been exceptionally difficult exercise in balancing educational necessity with fiscal reality. Our primary goal has been to right-size the ship while protecting our greatest asset, our wonderful staff. As staffing remains our largest expenditure of 64% of our total budget, we have approached this cycle with a commitment to empathy, transparency, and the responsible stewardship of taxpayer dollars. To meet our fiscal targets while minimizing the impact on our educators, we have focused on a strategy of minimizing reductions in force. We started this strategy last year. We will continue it this year and into next year. We are achieving about a $2.5 million reduction in pandemic-era staffing through the following strategies: attrition, leveraging retirements, resignations, non-renewals, and natural attrition, internal transfers and shared staff, reassigning qualified staff to fill vacancies rather than hiring externally, and policy adherence, maintaining strict compliance with our class size policy to ensure instructional quality remains high. This is a sliding scale. Some of the information you'll see tonight, because we're working pretty hard to reduce any layoffs that we currently have in this presentation, and we'll do that work over the next month. Additionally, by utilizing the healthcare cap waiver, we are providing the necessary runway to stabilize our finances, contributing to an overall budget reduction of over $5 million next year. I want to point out, especially to our taxpayers, that we know this will go above the 2% cap. It is necessary at this time if we want to right-size the ship and make sure we're going in the right direction and put in permanent structures so we're not revisiting the same cycle of reductions higher for the next 3 to 5 years. We need to really focus on creating structures and then holding those structures in place moving forward. Part of that restructuring will be around transportation, as you'll see in our presentation. Rigorous analysis of our transportation department identified an opportunity to save over $1 million by moving to an optimized 3-tier system. By allowing 30 minutes between tiers, we reduced trip tardiness and increased fleet efficiency. This transition was guided by the following non-negotiable guardrails: 1, student safety; 1, reducing crosstown busing; and also revising our hazardous routes report every 3 years. It is a district's responsibility to revise their hazardous routes report, so we now have completed that task. Wellness, incorporating research on teen sleep patterns and aligning with the New York City train schedules. And finally, efficiency, capping trips at 30 minutes, so no students are on buses for more than 30 minutes, and reducing the total number of buses in our fleet. A lot of that work will be done by a revision of school and start times that we'll be sharing in the coming weeks. That is about the lowest hanging fruit we could find for a really large savings that has a minimal impact. So we'll be sharing that data over the next week or so. Also, pre-K optimization and health benefits. We have scrutinized our pre-K budget, identifying trends that allow for an optimization of over $800,000. I want to specifically thank Leroy Johnson, Dr. Gilbert, Dr. Wabel, Frank Cervellis, and Tiffany Renaud for their diligent work in this area. Furthermore, SOMSD has joined several peer districts in pivoting away from the state health plan, which has a projected increase of over 30% this upcoming year, and another increase of over 30% the year after. We have moved to a self-insured model, so I do want to thank both our associations, ASCA and SOMEA, for their collaborative work on that. This move is critical for long-term cost containment and budget stability. Transparency and public engagement. We do not take the support of our taxpayers lightly. To ensure the community is fully informed before the final budget hearing, we will provide the following additional layers of analysis over the coming month: line item detail, granular breakdowns of departmental spends, action committee reports, insights from our community-based budget action committee and transportation action committee, public feedback loops, digital forums for communities to weigh in on specific restructuring goals. I do want to extend my deepest gratitude to our associations, Board of Education, senior leadership team, and our stakeholders. This has been a challenging season, but through collaboration, we are ensuring the long-term health of our schools. Whether you currently have students in the district, had students in the district, or never had students in the district, we want to make sure that you understand we take our role as stewards of the taxpayer dollar in a very high priority for this board and myself. All the work that we have been doing not only keeps in mind our families, our students, our staff, but also our taxpayers. So we thank you for your support.
Frank, you're on.
Frank, we're pulling up the PowerPoint now.
I see that. So
It's tiny.
I can't say that I've ever presented a budget to a district and met the district at the same time. So I would just say, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to work in the district. This is probably, I've put together over 30 budgets during my working career, and I've helped another 6 districts put their budgets together since retiring. And this was probably the most challenging project that I've ever encountered. It's a very large district. There are a lot of moving pieces, and getting a handle on a budget this size with a condensed time frame, basically, 3 weeks to really kind of finalize this has been a bit challenging. But I really couldn't have done it without the help of the staff. The central office staff has been fantastic. You have a great central office staff. The senior leadership team really dug in and spent hours and hours and hours helping me go through the budget, analyzing things. So it was a group effort, and I couldn't have done it without all of the help from the district. And you really have some great staff working behind the scenes to to keep things running. So with that said, just a little bit of background. I have been working in the back end of the district, helping out with some staff absences since about May of last year. So I was involved with some of the closeout for the audit. There was a transition of the assistant business administrator position. And once the new business administrator came aboard and got acclimated, I helped the district to perform some financial analysis and projections. And I was helping in the back end with some of the budget. And then when Mr. Moody had his unanticipated leave, there was a natural transition because there was a shortage of qualified business administrators. And I happened to be working in the district and knew a lot of the staff and had access into your systems and had a basic understanding of the budget. But with that said, it was quite a task to actually complete and go through the process of developing the budget. One of my strengths is budget development, budget analyzing, budget forecasting. And I really feel comfortable in the budget that's being presented tonight, with the caveat that what Mr. Bing said earlier is that the process will not end tonight. The process will continue, and we'll continue to refine, continue to review the budget, look for opportunities up until the night of the public hearing, because that's what we need to do. So we're presenting the preliminary budget tonight with the understanding that there are a lot of challenges that our district is facing, and a number of other districts in the state. I mean, you open the paper any given day, and you'll see that we're all facing very similar challenges of trying to rein in untenable health insurance costs, having all of our costs and being constrained to a 2% budget cap. The basic math, the numbers just don't work. So what we are here to present tonight is an overview of the budget that we've come up with, that we believe is a fair representation of our needs versus balancing taxpayer needs and fitting with all the budget constraints and the requirements that are placed on us.
So just want to identify some of those constraints we've been dealing with as we're developing this budget. You've heard of these constraints in our last year's presentation. I do want to emphasize we have a couple new ones that have popped up. One, the growing and fluctuating school enrollment needs as we move forward. Again, we have a high needs district. About 22% of our students are classified. We have a large and neurodiverse population. We want to make sure we're serving these students to the best of our ability. Aging infrastructure requiring maintenance as one of our big issues. I think what you will notice, and in our final budget presentation next month, I think you will see that for the last couple of years, we have kept money in the budget for facilities, recognizing that improvements will need to be made.
Can I have this on screen?
Oh, you go to the one with the arrows, guys. One more. Yep, thank you. Increased health benefits and property casualty insurance costs, technology infrastructure updates. I do want to shout out Mr. Bonds, who has really towed the line in regards to restructuring our CHS auditorium and has done a wonderful job around that. Fingers crossed by the new school year. Rigging is now complete and lighting should be completed by the new school year. So we're excited about that. And also mental health and security initiatives. We'll be having a mental health forum over the next couple of weeks. And obviously security is a big issue. I want to thank Mr. Morgan, who has had a very smooth transition into the district over the last month or so. So big thanks to him. And as Frank noted, our limited tax capacity is one of our lingering issues, expiring bank cap, and also our fixed state aid limits. Can we go to the next slide? Go ahead, Frank.
Okay. So those of you that have heard me give this presentation before will know that in my world of financing, everything revolves around your sources or your revenues of funds, because that's where we're capped by the state. So our cap is on the tax levy, and we have the limited amount to raise money in other areas. So by virtue of capping the amount that we can raise taxes, we will cap our expenses because we need to have our sources of income or revenues match our expenses. So what we put up here is a version that maybe many of you have seen different versions of this, because as we started to delve into the budget process, we started the 25-26 is our approved budget. 26-27, we started to put scenarios in, and we said, okay, if our tax levy can go up 2%, what does that buy us in terms of growth under the tax levy? If our state aid remains flat, what does that do? If we get an increase, what does that do? Extraordinary aid is an aid that comes in based on your special needs population, but it comes in after the fact, so we never know what amount we're going to receive. It's also, the state has a limited pool of money, and they look at everybody's needs and they split up the pool of money that they have. So it's a little bit of a moving target, and it's hard to budget for. The Medicaid number is a number that is given to us by the state, and the state requires us to submit Medicaid reimbursements. It's a 65-35 split. The state gets 65% of the money that's claimed from the federal government, and we get 35%. So the reason why there's a mandate to claim this, to claim Medicaid funds, is because the state gets 65% of that money. But our estimate that the state gave us is $110,000 for next year. We take in some money from rent, we take in money from out-of-district tuition, and we have this miscellaneous revenues, which captures basically everything else. Interest on investments. If we charge fees, if students break something, they pay fees to us. It's about $900,000. The next few lines are the district's use of various reserves. We have a couple of slides we can get into lately, but when you hear reserve or fund balance, it's basically savings that were generated either from a previous year or that by statute we're authorized to put into various reserves that can only be appropriated into the budget for very specific needs. So as you can see, last year we appropriated to balance the budget almost $14 million. That's the 6.9, the 4.45, and the 2.5 to balance that budget. Many of those reserves simply don't exist anymore. So this year, this 5.585 in reserve came from money that was generated in the 24-25 year that had ended. As many of you know, our default is if we raise the money and we don't spend it, by default, we're only allowed to hold on to 2% of our money in unreserved fund balance. That's our savings accounts that are not for another purpose. It's just to offset the general budget. And anything above that goes back to the taxpayers for tax relief. So this $5,585,000 is generated and was put right back in. It's the second budget year because of timing through audits. And by statute, some people call it a legal reserve. This money has to get appropriated. So this $5,585,000 came from the 24-25 budget. We are estimating, because of a budget freeze in the 25-26 year, that we are recognizing another $3.8 million in revenue generated from the 25-26 year. And we're using that as a revenue source. We're basically applying savings from the budget freeze from this year to balance next year's budget. Anybody that knows anything about budgeting knows that that is not sustainable in the long term, because we can't keep freezing budgets and not allocating those resources and then using those resources to fund the future year budget. It doesn't work. But as you can see, we can't change this overnight. We can't come from $14 million down to $5 million or $6 million, because that requires additional cuts. Because as we get to the bottom of this, the $174 million is our general fund operating budget. That's the limit of money that we can spend on our appropriations. So as we're building this budget, we look to build our revenues first because we're limited. Our two biggest revenue sources in terms of tax levy and state aid are fixed. And all the other ones, basically, we're applying previous year's savings to help offset the budget. And when we talk about that fiscal cliff or the structural deficit or this imbalance, this is what we're talking about. And we're starting to feel the pain because we have about $5 million less of revenue sources, even though we received the state aid increase, which I'll talk about in a second. There's a shortfall, and we've had to make up that shortfall. The most we can raise our budget is $174 million. That $174 million includes a 5.63% tax increase of almost $8 million. Over to the right-hand side, you can see that our base tax increase of 2% is worth about $2.8 million. And if we didn't get that additional 5.1 million, now we still have to apply to the county or the state to get that approved. We have to justify that we need that money. It's an exception. It's one of the only exceptions to that 2%. And the state put that in. It's automatically calculated. We were actually entitled to go up to raise an additional $500,000 to $600,000, and we could have taken this up to 5.6 million. But again, every dollar that you raise comes at a cost to the taxpayer. So we settled on 5.1 million based on our health insurance estimates, which we can get into in a little bit. And we're able to raise $7.9 million as a revenue source to help plug these other shortfalls. Down here, we went from $6,893,000 to $5,585,000. We lost $1.3 million in that line item of money that was generated. Additional balance, we lowered that by $644,000. And we're not budgeting any money for maintenance reserve, mostly because we only have about $700,000, a little over $700,000 left. This maintenance reserve, although it's restricted for use on required maintenance, went to help offset our operational or ongoing maintenance costs. So, we had to make up for all these shortfalls, and thankfully, we have this $7.9 million banking available to us. Previous versions, there's been a lot of talk about different versions of what this deficit could look like. The reason why we had different versions is we were doing different versions of what happens if we don't get any, what happens if the state, last year we weren't entitled to a health insurance increase. We don't know if we're going to get any additional state aid. So we did a bunch of different scenarios as we were preparing to come into this season, because we knew that this was going to happen. We just didn't know the extent. And unfortunately, it was all lumped in with, we had a governor that made a change. We were supposed to get our state aid figures at the end of February, and that got delayed for several weeks. So that was compounded. So we had a very condensed time to finalize what these numbers look like, to come up to this $174 million and then back into the budget and the expenses that we need. And the only other thing that I would say about this is that even though we got a 6% increase, we were entitled to quite a bit more. We were entitled to, I think we were shortchanged just over $1.3 million, because the state sends you the calculations of how much aid you're entitled to. And there was a fail-safe in this year's budget. I think it existed last year and possibly the year before, that said no district will swing more than 6% each way. So if you were one of the districts that was supposed to lose aid based under the formulas, you couldn't lose any more than 6%. Consequently, they also capped the other end, which unfortunately hurts this district, is that we were entitled to much more and we were capped at 6%. So we lost about a little bit over $1.3 million in direct state funding that would have helped to ease this. It would have been built into our cap, and it would have had a positive impact on the budget. And
Yeah, I want to reinforce what Frank said in regards to our structural deficits. If we do not act on these structural deficits, we will continue to be in this vicious cycle every school year. So part of this work, this budget cycle, is really trying, as we noted, to put some of those structures in place. We cannot keep relying on budget freezes every year and our savings. It is a formula for disaster.
Right. We can
next.
Yep. The next
Go ahead.
slide.
So,
Okay.
during this budget cycle, obviously, we were looking for fiscal efficiencies to close the gap that Frank talked about. Part of that work was around third-party contracts. We started this work last year. This year, we are initiating a robust request for a proposal process, really to see what companies are out there in regards to custodial, in regards to paraprofessionals, in regards to security, to make sure we are getting the best price and the bang for our buck. District has not gone out for RFPs in quite some time. So not only does going out for RFPs every 3 years, one, keep your current vendors honest, it also can present opportunities through other vendors. We also looked at custodial coverage a little differently. This year, we used the formula just using square footage instead of looking at personnel. So that square footage audit came into play during this budget, saving us some funds. Our security staffing we're currently looking at as well. We're looking at sharing staff at secondary school level. Our transportation, as I noted earlier, looking at changing our school start-stop times, looking to put about 30 minutes in between our bus tiers to really reduce some of the major inefficiencies we have been experiencing for, I'd say, over 5 to 6 years at this point. We did an in-depth pre-K analysis as well. Our energy costs, we are partnering with an energy company this year to really look at our energy culture and how it is utilized. So we're hoping to reap some savings from that as well. Strategic staffing planning, again, I want to make sure I'm mentioning this. We are leveraging our non-renewals, we are leveraging our resignations, we are leveraging our attritions, and we are leveraging our retirements in regards to not filling vacancies for people who resign, who are non-renewed, who retire, or just plain attrition. We won't be filling those vacancies. We started that work last year. We will continue that work this year. 25-26 budget freeze, as I noted, we froze this budget sometime in November. It is a practice we can't keep doing. And also we made a insurance change, as I noted earlier. We left the state plan that has been anticipating over a 30% increase for the upcoming year and a greater increase the year after. So not only South Orange Maplewood School District, but many other districts decided to leave the state plan and self-insure. Go ahead, gentlemen. You can go to the next slide. Frank, did you want to talk on that? Good.
We can, the only thing that I wanted to hit with the RFP process is that we're really taking a look at this, and we also have a resolution on the agenda for Thursday to get some assistance from probably the most experienced person in the state with purchasing and bidding and specification writing, because again, it's going out to bid, but it's also the tighter the specification that we can have, the better accountability we can have over the contractors. And we really want to look at our major service providers and come up with a performance-based spec and a very tight spec that will give us the most efficient bid possible. So we will be hopefully using the assistance of a professional who basically spent their life doing this to help us tighten up these RFPs, and with the hope, and then we make significant changes like we talked about in the custodial area that will help us to lower our operational costs, because those are, they're not direct instructional costs. So our goal is to try and, redirect as many funds back into direct instructional costs as we can, and kind of knock off, what Mr. Bing referred to as, low hanging fruit, or other areas that if we can achieve savings, if we can get a better product out of our custodial cleaning staff and achieve the savings, it's a win-win, because that money can go right back to either, provide tax relief or to be used in direct instructional and more impactful ways. So.
Yeah, for pulling out also that transition to a self-insured health plan, I do want to first shout out the work between with ASCA and Somea. They were collaborators on that process. They realized that the state health plan would be unsustainable with their rising costs, and they worked with us to transition to a self-insured health plan, maintaining the coverage quality. I also want to make sure that everybody notes we have a lot more control with a self-insured plan. We also have a lot more data in regards to budgeting and things of that nature. Also want to point out that we'll be working with our new self-insured companies to really push staff wellness. You'll be hearing more of that through the personnel committee. We're looking to create a staff wellness committee and really focus on the mental health and physical health of our staff. This job, no matter what you do, whether you're in the classroom, whether you're in central office, whether you're an administrator, it has changed since the pandemic, and it does require extra intentionality on our parts to make sure our staff is well. So we'll be working around that. If you go to the next slide, gentlemen, I do want to point out where we currently are in regards to health costs. Frank, you can touch on that if you choose to.
Well, this is an enormous cost. As you can see, these costs have crept up. So my last year as a full-time business administrator was about 5 years ago. These rates were close to half of what we're paying right now. They have skyrocketed over the last 3 years. And if anybody is reading about what's happening at the state, we're in this mire, the state health benefits plan, as more and more districts that have any opportunity to leave to go into it. Because when you're in a fully insured plan, your rate is your rate, and it doesn't matter what your claims are. This Direct 10 plan for a family is up over $70,000 in the school employees health benefit plan for next year. And they're talking about more increases in the 30% range. So as more and more districts are pulling out of the state health benefits plan, it's leaving the districts who don't have any other options, and the only ones that are available and that are going in there and it's like a death spiral. You've heard it. I mean, you read the paper. That's the death spiral because only your people that don't have any other options are going into this plan, and because those are people with high claims experience, the premium needed to cover those claims is not offset by districts that have better claims experience. That's the whole idea, whether you're self-insured or you're with a pool, is that people with no claims or very little claims offset the people that have higher claims. So in the state health benefits plan, as more districts that have good claims experience leave, the only ones that are left are the ones with really bad experience. And that's why, it's not just the cost, it's getting control over your long-term health insurance needs. Why the move was made to go to a self-insured plan, because we're buying our insurance and we're paying for our claims. The downside is we're not in a fully insured plan, and that cost can be somewhat subjective. We have reinsurance in place, but there are corridors that we need to meet. So we also need to be cognizant of the fact of how much money we're putting into our health insurance line, because we have to cover all of our potential claims, and it is a very new plan. We're into month 3, but as anybody who knows anything about insurance, that there's like a 2-month lag. This is called incurred but not reported. And those claims are just starting to tail in. So as we go through this, we're not going to know until 6 months pass, we're not going to have reliable claims data. So we're putting this health insurance budget together based on a number of different factors without a really, really, really pinned down knowledge of what our claims experience is trending and look like. So this is one of the variables that we had to take into consideration when putting a number in for that health insurance line.
So we've done some nice work around this. So I'll give a shout out to this board and other boards before them. We're at a point right now where, if you're looking at the last 3 negotiation cycles with our largest union, SOMEA, they're at about a 30% increase in salaries. If you're looking at ASCA, we're at about a 20+% increase in salaries over the last 6 to 8 years. One of our goals was also to increase our starting salaries in this district, which we significantly have, which has made us quite competitive. Our staff, especially our teachers, are now one of the highest in Essex County. So we'll continue to really monitor the health insurance side of this coin, because it is significant and it is something we will have the ability to project out. As Frank noted, once we start getting some claims experience numbers, we'll have a lot more control moving forward and a lot more data, which we never had with the state plan.
And that's key. I mean, the data that we're able to see now, I'm not talking about, individual claims. It's just the types of claims and how the trends are running. We can really analyze that data and make sound decisions moving forward. So this should be a long-term investment of us managing we're basically our own health insurance company right now. So there are a lot of other positives to being in this type of plan.
Go ahead, gentlemen. Go ahead, Frank. You could talk about operational efficiencies. One of the advantages of having Frank in the district as a consultant was that he could see behind the curtains and really take a deep dive into our operational efficiencies, which one of the things we noted when we first came into the district, that we needed some major changes. And when we talk about structural changes, a lot of them are in our operational efficiency. Go ahead, Frank.
Yep. So when I'm looking at the district, the biggest area for improvement that I can see is that at least in the business office, and I'm sure it's probably mirrored in other offices, is we are in a constant reactionary state. So instead of we are constantly reacting to something because there's a deadline, there's something that was missed because there's a staff turnover, there's a transition. And when we've had a lot of turnover, and when a new person comes in, they're digging out they're trying to play catch up, and then another one of their support staff members leaves and they're playing catch up, and there's a vacancy. And one of the reasons that I was retained was that you still you had a vacancy in an assistant job, and then you have another absence in a higher level back end position, that the person's has been out. So all of that work in the back end was not really, it was falling on other people. And when you have, the equivalent of two full-time people, trying to make up for all of that work, you end up being sitting in the back seat. And I think you've had a cycle of being in the back seat. And, my hope is that the district goes from being reactive to proactive and staying on top of things and looking things proactively and monitoring things. And a few things that we put in that will help us to kind of flip that switch is, we went to an electronic budget development system that was put in place. The first year it was put in place was last year. As you put these systems in, there's a learning curve. And this was year 2, and I think the process was a lot easier for everybody to understand, so that all of these account codes, we have over 900 budgetary lines, and every line is built with data, and it either gets pulled from the personnel system, a subject supervisor will enter something, one of the building principals, the director of technology, everybody has their lines and builds their accounts. We can go into those accounts and we can review those accounts. We can look at past historical trends in spending and really kind of dive in and really have a real-time look at what's happening with the budget. That process didn't exist, and that provides a lot of useful data and a lot of help. I don't know that we could have ever gotten through this process this year if that system wasn't in year 2 of being implemented. We have an electronic purchase order system that we started with the concurrent start of this school year in the 25-26 school year. So now that anybody that wants to place an order has to put a purchase order in the system electronically. It gets approved electronically. It automatically gets coded to the proper budgetary account line. But we need to do, as a district, we need to do a better job at identifying our lingering commitments and our encumbrances, and making sure that the purchase orders that are in the system accurately reflect our needs. And that I think is one thing that has probably been lacking. And I think that, again, we have to be proactive, and we have to start looking at all these, the budget forecasting and analysis. I can't stress to you how important it is for us to analyze our budget, stay on top of our budget, and forecast our budget. We're making a lot of assumptions in next year's budget. It's March, and this budget has to get us through next June. A lot of things happen and a lot of things change, and a lot of the assumptions that we make may or may not come to fruition. And one of the most key things and the vital thing that we need to do is to, once we set this budget in process in May, we need to immediately, I'll take the custodian bid, for instance. If we go out to bid we do the analysis, we're slated to do the analysis in May. The minute those numbers come in and we're ready to award that bid, we need to compare that bid to what we have budgeted in that line and the savings that we're supposed to achieve. And if we achieve the savings, great. If we achieve more savings, we need to track that. And more importantly, if the savings aren't realized, we need to now look for another line and look to see how we're going to pay for those savings. And we need to book that order for the amount, not the amount that we have budgeted, but the amount that we're going to spend. And if that's going to override that line, at that minute, we need to find another source and move the money and cover those expenses. That's what that is the goal that we need to get to from the business office and as a district. And that process, there's quite a number of people involved in that process. And this way, when we're looking at financial reports, we're looking at the most up-to-date, accurate financial reports, because the financial reports are only as accurate as the information that we put into those systems. So these all tie into our operational efficiencies. And the last one that's on here is, I think I addressed earlier, talking about really refining our RFPs. The better spec that we have, the more precise we can be, and we can throw in penalties for noncompliance and go to performance-based specs as opposed to, the number of staff that we need. We think that that's going to materialize in savings, but the most important thing we need to do once we establish the budget is to measure ourselves against that, and then we're using that as a guide when we're assessing our 26-27 budget. And as we roll right into the development of the 27-28, we're going to look at what our projected expenditures are and roll that into the 27-28 budget. So that's the long story about where we ideally should be heading.
Yeah, and I think we had some demonstrated success this year in regards to making sure we're controlling our costs. We did a nice job this year in regards to overtime and 6th period pay, dropping that by about 80%. We've done a nice job with powers. As Liz can note, we have a report out every month. We try to keep a tab on that. We need to do the same with custodial. We need to do the same with security. We need to do the same, as Frank noted, with our POs. Well, we're not guessing if this PO might hit in June. So those are 3 big areas that we really need to control and really put a person in charge of. And hey, this is what you're responsible for, to make sure we're aligned to our budget. Go ahead, gentlemen.
So this page has a lot of information on it. If I showed you my version of this page, so one of the things we look to do is these categories on the left-hand side are the state-defined categories. And when we roll into our accounting systems, we have to report everything into one of these categories. So when we set up an account code, when we put a purchase order in the system, we code it. And one of the things that makes me able to go into your school district and see what you're doing is I know that all of your facilities, your maintenance needs to go into your 261 accounts. Your custodian is your 262s, your transportation is your 270s. And every district has to report this way and roll up all these expenditures. So when we roll this up, we've heard of the Taxpayer Guide to Educational Spending. They key in on all of these different, we call them here, we have a name, we call them cost centers. They key into these cost centers, and we track these expenditures by cost center. The accounting system is automatically set up to subtotal everything and track everything by these cost centers. So one of the things that I like to do, and this is when we talk about, me personally, as I start to go through, the last 3 weeks, as much as we've been putting this budget together and we've gotten our state aid figures and making reductions, we're busy in the back end monitoring all those accounts and fixing all those accounts and making sure everything ties. But what I really need to do is I need to flip the switch and look at this budget holistically and look at it by program or cost center and say, what is this number telling me? And the basic math of this number is, so we know that our general fund can be 174, 084, 129, and our revenues and our appropriations were off by $2. The revenues are round numbers. The back end of our system doesn't round, and we actually have to go through now in the back end and get rid of all those decimal points so that the $2 is off. So if anybody sees a difference between our 26-27 proposed revenues and appropriations, it's off by $2, but $2 is easily obtained by the time we finish this process, and it's not going to have anything close to material impact. But we can see now our total budget went up 3.858. It's important to know that our budget, even though our taxes are going up almost 6%, our taxes are going up because we have to make up for those other revenues that we lost in terms of all the savings that we had applied in previous years to offset that budget. So our expenditures can only go up by 2.27%. And this is where we've made reductions, we've had additions. So, we can see that our employee benefits is not only health benefits, it's pension costs, it's social security costs. Some of these we're looking proposed to proposed. Some of these other lines within the employee benefits line were under budgeted this year. So in order for us to right align those numbers, we've had to put a larger increase on that, which is why you're seeing our total employee benefits line go up $6.3 million. And basically, in order to pay for that $6.38 million, you'll see minuses. You'll see operation and maintenance of plant is down $2.4 million. So the minuses are paying for the pluses. And the net result is that our overall budget is going up. Basically, we're going up 3.8 million. We can see all the pluses and minuses. And now what our next phase is, we're proving this out because, again, there's 900 lines of budgetary backline data, is now proving out this story and saying, does this story make sense and is it trending? And if I had shown you this from my other district, and I'm even building some back end stuff for you, like I'm looking at it's most, the taxpayer guide, the educational spending does a per pupil cost. And while I think that's important, I like to also key in on what percentage overall what percentage of the budget is each one of these functions and what's happening for year to year. And if I showed you my screen, you would see that the employee benefits line is 28,687,187. That represents a $6.3 million increase, but it's 28.61% of the general fund budget. So 28% of that budget is employee benefits, the 174 million. In our current year over the previous year, that employee benefits line, so that it's 16.48% of our budget. So 16%, $28 million is 16% of 174 million. The current year, our budget is 13% of the overall budget. So in 1 year, we've recaptured, it's eaten into 3% of our budget at the expense of some of these other lines. And when we go into the public hearing, I think it's important for us to see these trends. And what we can do with these trends is we can go back and we can look and we can say, we can compare ourselves to our peer districts and say what percent of our budget is, how much of our budget are we spending on transportation versus some of our peer groups. And it just gives us data to understand where we fall within our peer groups and how we track from year to year. Some of these are very similar. They track with the same percentage of the budget, and some of them have been reduced as an overall percent of the budget, and some of them have been increased. So when we go through the public hearing, I'll really take you through a lot more of this. Again, this is the tentative budget submission, and now we're in the budget proofing and verification process. But these are all the different functions these are all the different cost categories that we track, because this is what the state tracks, and we're able to kind of compare ourselves to peers, to district-wide averages. So we kind of report this in this manner, so it allows us to kind of expand and be able to compare and contrast. Our total budget. So our general fund is really, that's our operating budget. That's our day-to-day budget. Special revenue is all of our grants, and it also includes our preschool program. You will see that it looks like there's a 1.9% increase, or $1.9 million increase is 17%. But this is proposed to proposed. And if anybody sat in on budget meetings last year, we knew that we were all instructed to budget a very low percentage for all of our federal grants, not knowing what was happening with the federal government. So everybody who budgeted a very low amount for all of our grants. We ended up getting pretty much our entitlements. So if I showed you our adjusted budget for our special revenue fund, it would be much closer to the $13 million. So it's a little bit skewed. Our debt service is right online. So we do have some level debt service. And I think we looked at that. We don't really have any debt falling off anytime soon. So it should be pretty stable and pretty level. And then our overall budget is just over $200 million. It represents a 2.96% increase on the expenditure side.
I think one of the things we need to keep in mind is what is happening at the federal level right now in the US DOE. It's being dissolved. Grant monies are going to different departments. So I think that's going to come into play as we're moving forward and probably impacting what we do receive from the federal government. We have not received a lot of information on that. We will share once we do, but that's going to be a variable moving forward. Go ahead, gentlemen. So on this slide, you'll see some example of some of our work in regards to reductions to non-salary lines. When we talked about some of the work that we have been doing, you'll see a lot of lines. We've been basing a lot of this work on 3 years and what was spent. So you can easily go down that and share. You can see what reductions we have made. Frank, want to talk on that at all?
Yeah, these are not insignificant reductions. I mean, we're trying to carve out $6 million in program cost. So, I mean, if I start at the bottom, we've reduced our instructional supply and textbook accounts by almost $500,000. We've reduced the text budget, the technology budget in terms of our ongoing by $330,000. It was originally $250, and we needed more, and we made modifications. Again, these modifications that you see were the culmination of hours and hours and hours and hours of sitting down with all of our groups and pouring through what changes could be made to lower our operating costs. And we came up with over $6 million worth of changes, but some of them, a lot of them require a lot of work. We're restructuring our outsourced custodians. We think we can save $400,000 by doing that. We want to change how our lunch aids are being provided, and we think we can recapture $200,000 by doing that over we're currently the initial budget, which is where we thought we were going to end the year, plus any increases. We think that we can carve $1.6 million out of transportation, but it requires us tiering our bus routes. We had a line that was being used if somebody wanted to go on a sabbatical leave, and we removed that line. So now we don't have the ability to send anybody on a sabbatical leave because we're removing positions. So,
and some of these changes will change next year. For example, we remove science textbooks purchasing. State has changed the standards for science. So we're able to push that back this year, but that's going to be a must purchase as the standards change and the state changes its assessments, as well as we were purchasing some new ML textbooks as well that we're going to push off for another year. But as everybody knows, that's a growing population, and we'll need to make that purchase in 27, 28. So a lot of these you'll see coming back the year after. So again, we go back to the idea of really making structural changes in this budget.
Yep.
Go ahead, gentlemen. So here, this is where we are currently. We're at 23 positions eliminated. Out of that 23, 5 are RIFs. So this is not 28. This is 23 total. Out of that 23, 5 are RIFs. So what do I mean by that? So currently, and this is a sliding scale, this will change. As Frank noted, we are still doing work on efficiencies and working to reduce our layoffs. So you're looking at 18 positions that are being eliminated, and what that simply means are those people are not being handed a layoff slip, a pink slip. We're just eliminating positions that people are either resigning from, they are retiring from, they are being non-renewed from, or they are resigning. Plain and simple. We're not filling those vacancies if we don't have to, utilizing our current class size policy. As we noted, we have to right-size this ship since 2019, and the pandemic funding that is now gone, that was utilized to shrink class size by bringing more staff on. Close to, if I recall, last year we were utilizing the number of around 75 or more staff were brought on to shrink class size when the pandemic hit. Those staff are still on board. So we made a promise not only to ASCA, but also to SEMEA that we would do this in a strategic and intentional manner, reducing staff through attrition, through non-renewal, through retirement, and through resignation, and we're sticking to that plan. So as noted, right now we're at 23 total. 5 of those are RIFs, and again, we are working to reduce those RIFs over the next month. That is currently bringing us to about $2.5 million in savings. So we'll continue to update folks as we move along. Obviously, if you're comparing this to other districts, we are in a pretty good place right now. However, we want to get into a better place over the next month. So as I noted, this is a continued work in regards to reducing the impact on our wonderful people in this district. Go ahead, gentlemen.
So if anybody can read this, you get the bonus points for the night, which is so. I'm going to actually. This is actually so small for me to read that. So it's in the handout, I believe, that everybody received tonight. There's been a lot of discussion about fund balance and what the district has in its balances and various balances and what it doesn't have. I took the liberty so that I could get an understanding of what the trend is like in our balances, and also B, to kind of present. And I think when you present it, you can see that there has been this shrinking of overall balances and the balances for different purposes. So I just wanted to kind of go through these numbers, and these numbers tie out to all of your audits. On the left-hand side, I put the source down for the 24-25 year. It's either the ACFA or the AMR. In previous years, it will be within like a page or two of the 24-25 reference. If anybody really wants to go back and take a look at this, we have the B exhibits of the auditor, the governmental fund balances, and this is where every auditor across the country tries to align things so that we can compare ourselves to another district in Texas or Arizona. Listen, I've looked at financial statements for a long time. When they convert the C schedules to the B schedules, there's a lot of information that's thrown in to make it be comparable so that we can compare all across the nation. But New Jersey is so different, as is every other district, that the C schedules, which is the budgetary basis, the ones that we really follow. So you can see that as of June 30th, our total fund balance for our governmental funds is $29 million. 2 years earlier, it was $40.8 million. That's a significant drop over 2 years. Our maximum unreserved fund balance. I can't talk enough about this. I've been around for a really long time. When we first started doing budgets, actually up until the time that the 2% and the budget vote got put in, we weren't allowed to have less than 3%. There was a recommended range of between 3 and 5% of your operating budget. And when all of that came through, we were restricted to a hard 2%. So we have a district that has a $174 million operating budget, and we're only allowed to have $3.7 million in our savings account that isn't designated for a specific purpose. That's a scary thought on a district this size. And you can see these are all the reserves that we have. I'll take you through how they're reserved. But $3.7 million in unreserved fund balance is a frighteningly low number. So we just need to keep that in the back of our mind when we're talking about health insurance budgets and talking about the magnitude and salaries and out-of-district placements. This is the only contingency above and beyond what we have budgeted. And if we do have any contingencies budgeted, which we do have some in our budget because we have to, because we only have $3.7 million to rely on. Reserve for encumbrances, or typically it's orders that were placed, but the services weren't rendered. So that rolls over into the future year. You can see that we've steadily, we don't have the money, we can't place orders for the following year. So it's all declining. Our legal reserve is designated for a subsequent year. These are funds that are generated in the prior year. Listed as your excess surplus number. We have additional assigned fund balance. So in order to balance this budget, if I held up that projected revenue screen a couple of slides earlier, you can see how these all tie in. These are the numbers, portions of the numbers that were used to help fund this 25-26 budget. We have a reserve of $4.6 million as of June 30th. You can see over to the right, there are maximums. It's regulated by statute. And this is 60% of the amount of projects identified in your long-range facilities plan. So the board just approved the long-range facilities plan, and the maximum that we can have in our capital reserve account is $155 million. We're currently funded that. We're funding at less than 3%. So we have $4.6 million to deal with all of our capital needs that hasn't been designated for anything else. Just can you just do me a favor and just toggle back to the to slide number 9?
Frank, we didn't rehearse this.
No, we did rehearse.
You can't toggle back.
So I want to show you, because I was looking at this tonight. Oh, nope, next one. Yep. So if you can see this capital outlay, this is where all of our capital needs are budgeted, okay? Capital reserve helps to go fund our capital needs. We're budgeting $82,000 for our capital needs. And $68,000 of it is in a repayment that we're owed back to the state. So we're budgeting nothing for the ongoing capital needs of our district, and we have $4.6 million left. And we all know the condition of our buildings. So I just wanted to point that out as I go backwards, because as I was looking through the budget tonight and I was starting to get a feel for the story that this budget's telling me, and I rolled in those percentages, I saw that we're spending almost nothing in capital when we're such a massive district that we're putting nothing in our operating budget for our ongoing capital needs, and all we have left is $4.6 million. For me, from an outsider standpoint, that was something that stuck out to me as significant. So can you go back to the fund balance one? I think that is slide. I lost my screen here. So slide 12.
It's up there, Frank. Yep.
Yeah, good. So that's our capital reserve. Our maintenance reserve, again, our maintenance reserve as of June 30th of 2025 was $3.225 million. We used $2.5 million as an offset to our general operating expenses that were required maintenance. If we need to replace doors, if we need to fix a boiler, if we need to replace the entire boiler, it goes in capital. But if we need to repair the boiler, it goes into maintenance reserve out of our operating budget. So we have, at June 30th, we had $3.2 million, but we used $2.5 million to offset the current year's budget. So as of June 30th, we'll only have about $725,000 left. This is also a statutory calculation, and it's based on the square footage of our buildings multiplied by replacement cost. And if we get this back, if we don't do anything about this $725,000, we'll have about 10% of what we're allowed to have as a maximum in the statute for our maintenance reserve. So these numbers are very, very low. We have an unemployment reserve. We basically self-fund our unemployment claims, which is not uncommon for a larger school district. So we take the employer contributions, and instead of sending them to the state, we put them into a reserve account. And as employees file for unemployment sends us the bill, and we're basically self-funded, just like the health insurance. We have a reserve that has been steadily declining. It was $639 2 years ago, and June 30th of 2025, it was $393. If we run out of money in that reserve, we can't not pay unemployment claims. We have to start funding that out of the budget, and that will be another line for us to deal with. So this is something that we also have to watch. And then excess surplus, again, is money that was generated. This is money that was generated out of the 24-25 year that automatically has to be used toward the 26-27. So if you look at that revenue line, you'll see that the $5,585,000 is used as a revenue source to help build the 26-27 budget. So this is a snapshot of our revenues, and this is a snapshot of our fund balance that ties to the last few audits that we've had.
Go ahead, gentlemen. So next steps for us, on the 27th, we'll submit the preliminary budget to the county office for review and approval. Ongoing assessment will be really the next and biggest thing we're doing moving forward, keeping in mind that this current budget is a living document. We expect more retirements, resignations, attrition, non-renewals, and our intent, as we did last year, was not to fill those vacancies or to fill those vacancies if needed with transfers from throughout the district. So as we move forward over the next month, we'll be giving our board more details and also providing the public with more details. This budget, I stress, is not static. It is a living document as we work on more efficiencies and look to reduce layoffs. And as Frank noted, stay within our plan of putting in structural parts that will keep this budget strong over the next 2 to 5 years. So we're not revisiting this scenario at this time every single school year.
Yep. And the one other box that's on there is the tax impact. And so again, South Orange, Maplewood is a very unique situation because they are two towns that share in one school system, and they share the cost of that school system. The breakdown between how much each community pays toward the overall nut. So our general fund tax levy next year is $149 million. That is the only number that we can control. So there's a debt service component that was previously authorized. In the case of this school district, we have another unique situation where in other school districts that would have been authorized by the voters, but we have a board of school estimate for referendums only. And if we were going to go above our statutory limitations, that can authorize on behalf of voters. So the total tax needs are the general fund tax levy and the debt service needs, which has been previously authorized. The most critical piece of this breakdown is we need the county equalized values. So when the county develops their tax bills, they need to figure out a fair way to apportion their tax needs under all the constituent districts within their county or the municipalities. So they have a formula. Every county they use a formula so that they do an apples to apples comparison of every single municipality in that county. We use that equalized value because it equalizes South Orange and Maplewood to do the split and decide how much of our total tax needs goes to South Orange and how much goes to Maplewood. That's the most critical piece of information because everything then flows and says, okay, what's the total ratables, what's the average for each town? But until we know that split, we can't throw a tax number out. And we are not going to know that. I believe we heard yesterday that it looks like the county is looking to approve the equalized values on April 4th. So within the next 2 weeks, we'll have that information that we can push out. Again, we have no control over the split and ratables and average homes. We have to report it because we want to let people know what their impact could be. But the only number that we can control is how much we need to raise to support the program that we have.
Yeah, I think our work going forward, as we noted, we will continually assess this over the next month. As one is navigating our contractual increases, it's navigating the millions of pandemic funds that have sunset. It's navigating the inflation of operational costs and really staying within our goal of protecting the classroom while honoring our taxpayers. So that's the work we have in front of us over the next 30 to 40 days. You, sir?
All right. Questions? As a reminder, we're going to have this discussion portion regarding questions on the budget. When the resolution comes up to approve the budget, that's when we're having any questions and discussion about that resolution itself. Questions on the budget. Probably everyone has one. I saw your hand first. Board Member Higgins.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for all this work. It's very clear that this has been hours and hours and hours of everyone's time and that you've been very specific and focused and digging as deep as you can, which I think is the general ask. And I think it hopefully will set up success for future years. I also really appreciate you saying our district and we, even though you've only been here for a little while, even though you've been like shadowing for a while. I really, really appreciate that. I just had a question about the equalized values. Does that affect the 5.63%? How are those two things related or not?
So the 5.63% is, well, I mean, it depends on how in the weeds you want the answer to be, but the 5.63% is how much we are proposing to raise the taxes needed to fund our general fund or operating budget for the 26-27 school year. So those tax needs will be combined with the tax needs to support the debt service that was previously authorized. The combination will give us the total tax needs for the school year. That gets calculated into a calendar year because we go on a July 1st to June 30th. The municipalities work on a calendar year. We basically take half and half. So we take half of our needs from the 25-26 and half of our needs from 26-27. That becomes our 26 calendar year needs. So we take those total tax needs and then we look at the ratio of the equalized values between the two towns. And so I'm going to throw just a hypothetical number out. One town has a $10 million equalized value, and the other town has a $6 million equalized value. The total equalized value is 16 million, and the one with 10 million would pay their percentage of that $16 million. So once we know the percentages, we know the splits, then we do separate calculations for each town. And then we look at their actual ratables and we look at their average assessed home and we calculate what that tax increase would be for the theoretical average homeowner. So that's the long story of how the rest of this.
You want to summarize that for us? First?
Nope, not at all. Thank you so much. I will not be summarizing.
I'll throw a screen up and I'll show you the breakdown and I'll take you through the breakdown. And it'll make more sense when you can actually see numbers behind it. I don't want to throw a speculative number out because, I spent 16 years in a regional district, and a lot of times that regional district, sometimes the ratio between the two towns had more of an impact than what we were doing in terms of how much of an increase or decrease we were proposing for our taxes. So it's just, and once that number's out there, it's out there. So I'd rather just wait and get the real numbers and present the real numbers. And I could walk you through that calculation to have you understand it a little bit better.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and I know everyone's going to have some questions, so I will start from the beginning. I know Jeff has a follow-up. Go ahead.
Oh, so I just said that there are actually two important areas in our taxes where the number 57% comes up, because about 57% of our all-in taxes go to the school district, and historically Maplewood has had 57% of the total equalized valuation of the two towns. So perhaps the number that's going to be certified in April by the county is going to be a little bit different from the usual 57% to 43% split. But traditionally, like Maplewood is about 57%. I think South Orange Maplewood, based on the October certification, South Orange had more equalized valuation growth, so it might be a bigger tax increase proportionally for South Orange than for Maplewood, but I guess we'll see. Anyway, remember 57% comes up twice here.
Jeff, do you have a question while we're here?
No, I don't.
Okay, fair enough.
I just wanted to share that.
Fair enough. Board Member Brown?
I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So I guess it seems like we didn't use any of our capital reserves or maintenance reserves, like as of, since the end of since June. Is that correct? So like what we're seeing here is the balances is likely what the balances are in the capital?
Yep. So capital reserve is an easy answer. The capital reserve, no funds have been appropriated into the 25-26 budget for capital reserve. So, we'll earn some interest on those funds. So the number may change a little bit. We also have an old project from 2001 that we're trying to close out that's in our capital projects funds. And if we are able to close that out, a balance of that money, since it was funded from capital reserve may go back to capital reserve. So those are the only things that would change the capital reserve balance. Maintenance reserve, we did have a balance. We appropriated $2.5 million to fund the portion of the budget. Let me see if I can throw a number.
No,
out.
I remember that distinctly.
So-
I was actually wondering, of the 700,000 that we had budgeted to have be left in our maintenance account, is that still roughly how much we have in our maintenance
This is-
reserves?
So this is the trickier part.
Okay,
That $2.5 million went to offset. It's called Function 261. It's required maintenance. And that total budget was about $2.8 million in the 25-26 year. So right now, if we don't only expend everything in our 261 accounts, everything above $300,000 will revert back to the maintenance reserve account. So it's very likely that we may not spend down all of our 261 accounts in the 25-26. And that, again, everything goes back to the funding source. So with any other line, if we don't spend it, it gets set up for tax relief because you can't have more than 2%. If we funded money in those lines using maintenance reserve and we don't spend it, it has to go back to maintenance reserve. So, this is compounded by the fact that we've had a change in directors of facilities. So all the projects that were initially slated in the budget may not all get done. And if they don't get done and we don't spend that money, it will automatically revert back into that account. So that account is very difficult for us to pinpoint. We can look at what we have encumbered and spent today. We have a plan in place for all the needs that we have. And whatever we don't spend will automatically reserve back, and it'll go back into that maintenance reserve fund. So it's likely that something will come back to it.
okay, thank you so much. And then related to our use of additional fund balance to balance this year's budget, it looks, we're using $3.8 million. So is it a fair statement to say that essentially this year, to balance our budget, well, I guess one way I'll say it is, are we spending $4 million more than we are getting in reimbursements?
So I'll phrase it a different way.
Okay.
We are front loading, and we're saying that. So by default, if we didn't put anything on that line, that 3.8 million, which 2 years ago you didn't, and the years that I did my budgets, I never front loaded anything. By default, if in the 25-26 year, if that year ended and we ended the year with $5 million, that $5 million would be used to build the budget 2 years until it would help us in 27-28, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
But because we're front loading it and we're anticipating that we're going to accrue this savings. Now we have, in order to do this we have this thing called a recapitulation of fund balances. On the recap of balances, we have to plug in that we're going to generate an additional $3.8 million. I have to send by Friday all the documentation to the county and say, like, these are all the lines. Here's our board secretary's report, and we think that we can generate $3.8 million. And they have to approve that in order for us to be able to use that. So, like, when Jason says that the budget process is not over, there's still a lot of moving pieces that we need to put together. One of them being this $3.8 million that we think we're going to use. I think that we can justify to the county that we do have the money because we've frozen funds, and we have a supplemental document that we've highlighted $3.8 million. But that means that we're basically freezing money, and we're taking money that was originally raised to be used in the 25-26 budget, and we're pushing those monies off to balance the 26-27 budget is exactly what we're doing.
Right. So in a way, we need
Yeah.
to be spending $4 million less, ideally.
Ideally, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But understand that the other piece of that is we generated 5.8 million from 2 years ago. So as we go to build, when we look at budgets, we have to look at 3 years. So when I'm looking at your 26-27 budget, I'm already thinking about 27-28. And this problem is not going to be fully resolved, because if we're using $5.8 million from money that was generated 2 years ago, and then we're also saying we're going to generate another 3.8 million, that 3.8 million isn't going to be available for the development of the 27-28 budget. And that's going to present another budget for 27-28. This is the cycle that we're trying to break out of, but we have to do it proactively, and we have to do this with a vision, like what Jason said earlier, is always looking 2 and 3 years down the road of what's going to happen. So it's in an ideal world. It's not ideal to do it, but the alternative is we have to make another $3.8 million in reductions, and that's a balancing act. So if you look at it in the aggregate of all the money that we're putting for reserves to the 25-26 to balance it, and to the 26-27, we've cut it down by almost a third. And if we can look to make these changes over 2 or 3 years and balance all these things through attrition and looking, on a 2 or 3 year basis, we can kind of ease that pain a little bit.
Thank you, Frank. Board Member Nyer, question? No question. Board Member Callahan.
Yes. First, thank you again. Frank, Mr. Bing, SLT, ASCA, and Somaya Partners. I know that tonight is a result of a lot of hours of your time and labor, so thank you. So as we're reviewing this preliminary budget, I think staffing is always an area of heightened sensitivity and interest, probably for us as a board, and I know certainly for the community. So as we move forward in the process, I think, we talk about kind of making more of these structural changes, and I think a part of that is some of this right-sizing effort that we have discussed tonight. I think it would be helpful for us to maybe see and share some more information about hiring and enrollment trends, and then that analysis, just to have that visual of what are these efforts following this pandemic era hiring? Because I think providing that context might also help us better understand some of those decisions as we talk about this through the lens of being kind of a long-term process to help stabilize what we're doing in terms of budgetary decisions. So if there is any high level, additional insight tonight, that would be great, but certainly just acknowledging how that might take shape in the future, and understanding, of course, the fluidity to that. I think that would be a net benefit for the community to kind of understand that process and be able to see those trends over time, particularly as they might impact where we go in the future.
We have a couple slides in there. This is 12 slides out of 37.
Yeah.
So we have 3 slides that actually cover that. We just didn't want to share that tonight. It's work in progress, but the HR did a nice job around that data, so we'll be sharing that data moving forward.
I'll jump in quick. With regard to our total special revenue funds, you mentioned that in light of the questions of what the federal government was going to do last year, we had budgeted less than we were entitled to. As I recall, I think we had budgeted maybe 75%. Do you know what we are budgeting and expecting for the current school year? Are we now looking at the full amount that we would be entitled to, or a percentage of that?
I believe we used 80 or 85%. That's kind of a standard that they use, but the year before, where typically you're suggested that you budget 80 to 85%. I know the districts cut this, and I think one of your line items, maybe the IDEA grant, instead of budgeting it at 70%, I think it was even budgeted at 30%. So it was a really low estimate, which made these numbers look higher, and it's also being compounded by the preschool numbers. It's not hard to break down. We really, as a district, we don't get a lot of federal assistance. I mean, if our total budget for next year is 13 million, the preschool program is like 10 or 11 million dollars of that. So I think there's only $2 million in non-preschool numbers. And again, I'm getting more and more familiar with the numbers for our district, but this piece, I've really only been here for like 3 weeks. So in a perfect world, I'd love to be able to tell you that that we have $2 million in our other grants, and we have $11 million in this. And I think I'm really pretty close to those numbers. I just would really have to look at it and get back to you, let you know. But the bulk of that special revenue fund is the preschool program. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, we were given numbers a couple of years ago when the new regime came into play. So our county office gave us numbers and some guidance in regards to, hey, budget this, because we don't know what's going to come down the pike.
Okay, over this side, Board Member Kapadia, any questions?
Frank, first off, excellent overview. 10 out of 10, no notes. It was great. But you did mention something that resonated, and I think it's worth repeating, and then I'll have a question over that, is that in the public hearing that we're going to get an analysis of where our cost centers as a percentage of the general fund compares to other districts. I think that's important context for all of us to walk away with. But that said, is there anything in this preliminary budget that stands out where we're over-indexed or even under-indexed?
I wish I was in a better spot to give you that answer, because, and I said this to you when I met with you last week. Like, we really jumped in March 2nd, and we have 900 lines, and we looked at each line individually to make sure that we could substantiate what was happening in each line. And then the state aid came out, and then we had to make adjustments. And then, we've been constantly in this flux of making adjustments. And I'm just now, and then we had to start budget presentation stuff together. It was like a week between all of this stuff. So the short answer is, I really need to delve into that cost center analysis and look to see what these trends are, and look to see what's happened over the last 2 to 3 years to explain what happened and make sure that the story that those numbers are telling is reflective of what we think is happening. And that's the last piece that flushes out if there's something that's over budgeted or under budgeted, because any one of these increases and decreases, we should be able to have an explanation for. And I'm personally doing the best that I can. I'm not at that level where I could say, like, this looks out of line. Well, I'll tell you that the capital looks very out of line to me. I added up all your administrative costs, and I looked at the percentage of your administrative costs to your overall budget. Hang on a second. If you just humor me for 2 seconds, okay. So if you can look at this number, I just started delving into this stuff in the last day or two. So as we can see this, so your administrative costs, I just bolded. I'm a big color guy. You'll get to know that, but these are our different areas. So you can see that we're hovering right under 7% for our total administrative costs as a percentage of our general fund budget. When I look at these numbers from last year, if I highlight these guys, I'm at 6.75. I'm right in line in terms of the percentage of the overall budget for your administrative costs. And what I do is I look right across and say, okay, here's your library media center. We went from 1.35% of the budget to 1.36. The next line, we're at 1.5. So I am now building in the back end. I'm looking at this. So this number right here, I don't like this number. We went from 29.7 to 27.39. And when you go through these numbers, we did that because this line was 13% of your budget, and now it's this 16.5%. So this, to me, becomes very clear where our budget funds are being diverted to, knowing that we have to keep reducing our budget funds. But now, to me, the percentage of the general fund budget is a very telling number, more so than per pupil and all that stuff, because it says, okay, like, how much of our budget is going to these different pockets. And I would, like, in my last district, I could go back 10 years and look at this stuff and say, okay, 10 years ago, health insurance was 10% of your budget. Now it's 16% of your budget, and it's coming at the expense of all these other areas. So this is very telling for me. And by the time we get to the public hearing, I'll have a lot more, listen, if you're not a numbers person, you're not going to be very happy with me during the public hearing, because I could talk to you for a long time about this stuff.
So
and-
our taxpayer, just to frame it for folks, so our taxpayer guide, we're compared to 96 other districts that are 3,500 students or more. So that's the
Yes.
cohort that we compare ourselves to. We have a slide in the longer version of this, but we'll have that comparison as we move forward with between those 96 other school districts.
Yep, and I just listen. I just want you to understand the stuff that's going on in the background. So we put this together. I think a few of you have seen this. So these are not my numbers. These come from the taxpayer guide. These different indicators are what the state feels that people should be, checked on in terms of our ranking and our these are cost per pupil. The number one piece is your budgetary cost per pupil. It's your budget divided by your pupils. You can see that we have been steadily declining, right? But this number, it's important to know that we're 49th out of 96, right? So we're 49th out of 96. What's also important is I look at this indicator and I say, okay, our total cost per pupil, we're 49th, right? But our classroom instruction, and again, these are not my numbers. Our classroom instruction is 74th. So that to me, like if you're saying what I see from the outside, I saw that as a powerful thing saying, okay, if we're only ranked 50th with our total cost, more of our funds are going to classroom instruction than our peers, because in a perfect world, if we're spending the same on everything, we should be right around the 40s on all these indicators. So anything that's higher than 49th, I would look at and say, okay, we're spending more money than our peers in those areas. And if I see it going to classroom instruction, that's if it's going to go somewhere, that's not a bad thing, right? Our administration, 49th, we're at 53rd. I mean, we're right within. It's not something to me that would stick out. Legal. Everybody knows that, right? You guys have been talking about this. I've heard this, but we went from 85th down to 77th, and our budget is down to 65th. This is a good trend. So as we go through this, there's a lot of this data that we can use. And again, this is not necessarily for the public hearing, but this is like, in my last district, we delved into this stuff, and we had, the standing committees would look at this stuff and we track it, and we track it over years to just see where we are compared to this ranking. And then we developed peer groups and said, okay, we compared ourselves to, you're not going to compare yourselves to all 96 districts. Hopefully there's a peer group that are like-minded, and you can pull their rankings up against your rankings and check it from year to year. And there's a lot of positive data that can come out of this if you're into analyzing data and looking at stuff that I think would be a worthwhile endeavor for this district to understand, because it can help guide you when you're making these decisions and feel comfortable about some of the things you're seeing. But some of the stuff that I'm seeing from the preliminary basis, which I'll share, listen, I have no skin in the game. I'll show you that, the areas that I think are positive and the areas that I think that stick out, just based on looking at all these different comparisons and these different analysis that I can look at. And which is why I kept stressing when we were talking earlier about the finance committee about tracking all of our stuff and using the predefined cost centers to really look at our stuff, because then we can measure ourselves and all the data and the reports are generating this stuff. I mean, it's powerful stuff if you're into it.
So again, just to reinforce, this isn't our data, right? So the taxpayer guide is public access, performance report cards, public access. These are all public documents that are accessible by anyone.
Yep.
Okay. Board Member Sackett Gable.
Yeah, just for Superintendent Bing, building off of Board Member Callahan's question around staffing, I was just thinking about how seeing those numbers for possible transfers and maybe even possible rifts could cause some anxiety for staff members who are looking at that. I was wondering if you can give like a rough timeline for the process or for communication that that our staff members can expect as we move into May and final budget adoption?
Yeah, now for us, if you look at our 3 years of data, we should expect more retirements, more attrition, and more resignations over the next couple weeks. Those are coming in, which obviously will have a major impact on these numbers. And again, I do want to emphasize that these are positions. Okay, these are not people getting RIF notices or pink slips. These are simply positions that we are economizing based upon our pandemic spending in 2019 and 2020 and adding extra staff on. So where we can share instructors, where we don't need to keep a class open, we can just move kids into another class that may have very low student size. We are doing it where we have someone with a special cert, where we can move into a vacancy, a retirement vacancy, and don't have to externally hire. That is what we're doing. So these numbers will change, and our work is to change these numbers for the good, to reduce the amount of RIFs. But if you're looking at the total number of 23, 18 of those, we're not giving people pink slips. These are vacancies that we are not filling, plain and simple. So over the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll have a lot more information. As we did last year, if we had transfer notices, we got them out as early as possible. So we'll continue that work, and we'll continue working with Ask and Somea as well and keeping them in the loop. We just had our initial meeting today.
All right, Board Member Steffen?
How do you pronounce your last name, Frank?
Well, that it depends who you ask. If you ask me, they told me it's Cervels. So
Okay.
sounds nothing but that.
Mr. Cervels. Okay. So the item that really jumps out is healthcare. Our healthcare costs are going up 30.74%, which, to be fair, is not a criticism of anybody here. They're skyrocketing nationally. We changed from a state healthcare plan to a self-insured plan a few months ago with the idea that it would bring our healthcare cost increase from 30-some% down to 11%, but it looks like we're at 30.74%. So what do you think happened? How confident are you in that number? Could it go up or down this year? And do you have any sense of what we're looking at next year or the year after that?
So this is clearly, it's one of the largest line items in our budget, and it's something that we can provide much more clarification on how we arrived at those numbers. You know, we talked about this in some detail at the finance committee meetings. You know, we're self-insured now. So that number that we put on that line has to cover all of our needs. And we're a little bit of a backseat because as much as we've had an analysis done, and in theory, we're in a plan that should save us money, the reality is we're fully self-insured. We have $3 million in savings to fund above and beyond that line, you know, aside from anything else we can scrap from another area. And we have a large potential exposure, and we really don't have reliable claims data because of the timing. So we're not going to get reliable claims data until 6 months into this process, which is way too late for us to set reliable rates. So we're using our best judgment with the input of our broker, with knowing what an anticipated renewal is going to be for our reinsurance, knowing where our corridor is going to be, and really we're trying to protect ourselves, knowing that we have also this allowance that allows us to raise taxes to cover this specific cost, and knowing that we could have raised another $600,000 more. So there's an acknowledgement that knows that we could need this. So the difficulty is if we cut $1 million out of this and we certified the budget and claims started coming through 3 months from now, 4 months from now, when we really have an idea, and we don't have enough money to cover our claims, we have a huge problem. So this placeholder, you know, the beauty about a self-insured plan is that we're in control of all of our claims. The difficulty and the scary part of a self-insurance plan is that you're on the hook for anything that gets incurred. And, you know, there's been some bad experiences, including one, you know, potentially in this district, that the self-insurance numbers didn't work out exactly as planned. And, you know, we took a little bit of a dealing with it. So this number is a very, very, very critical number to the health of our budget and our district next year. It's a big number.
So that relationship with our brokers is really important. So we get updates from our broker on a regular basis in regards to trends. And as Frank noted, we need some more time to really say that data is solid. But we are getting, at this point, some positive info on trends, and that's
We're-
at this point. It's
Yeah,
2 months in.
We're getting great data, but it takes
Yeah.
2 months to spin up, and then we need a couple of months of spun up claims to really reliably come up with an estimate. So it's the toughest number outside of our out of district placements to pin down. And I think in this given year, it's even tougher because of the timing of everything. So the goal is to put what we believe will fund it adequately, knowing that we need to monitor it. We really track this and be proactive. And we've set up the mechanism to be proactive about this particular line and proactively monitor it. And there's no thing that if we get into September and October and we start really having reliable claims data and we find out that we have a shortfall or that we have money, we can, the budget is a fluid document, and we have to get to the point where we can fluidly, proactively manage that. In a perfect world, let's say the best thing happens and we ask for, $25 million in that line, and we get to September or October, and it is getting more and more reliable that we might only spend 23 million. We may look at that $2 million and see if there's something, and we may have a hole somewhere else that we need to plug. And this is the job of, this is like the person sitting in my seat is really the job to manage all this stuff together. It's not just any one line. This is such a big line. And it's such a tough year for us to deal with.
Yeah. So just a couple follow-up questions. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Paul,
I'll
you first.
two other things just quickly. You would, capital reserve is $4.6 million, maintenance reserve is 700,000. In your colloquy with Board Member Brown, we talked about how those might not be exact numbers, but in an ideal world where we don't have these kind of fiscal pressures, what would be an ideal amount in capital reserve and maintenance reserve for this district?
I mean, listen, I got a report sent to me last week from the architect that you guys just had a new long range facilities plan put together, and it's hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects, and so far you have secured funding for 4 million of it. That to me seems very low to me. I mean, just seeing what's been happening, I just started to get keyed in by your facilities director, and every day there's a problem happening somewhere, and all the facilities are aging, and you have significant, from what I can see, and I've just gotten into this, there are significant facility needs. So I would say as much as you can have in those funds, but the difficulty now is how do you get the money to put in those funds when you're cutting positions and you don't have a line item for those funds? I mean, it's a very difficult position that we're in to talk about, adding funds to those reserves when we're talking about having structural deficits in our operating budget. I mean, it's not an ideal situation, but I was shocked at the amount of money that you don't have in those funds, given the size of your district, personally.
Yeah. And one last thing, if you could just help me understand something. If you go to slide 9, I see special education instruction, we're increasing our spending there. Speech, OT, PT, we're increasing our spending. Child study teams, we're increasing our spending. Okay. But then I go to the next slide and it says, the first line here, I know this is non-salary. It says special ed / special services reduction. And then a couple lines below, there's a reduced paraprofessional budget. So could you explain to me, can you square this for me?
Yeah, so the paraprofessional will be the RFP we've been talking about. So right now we're in a pretty bad contract. We've discussed that a few times in regards to the extra compensation we are pushing out. So she then went through her data. I think some of the numbers you're talking in the previous slide, we are adding, as we did last year, some programming to keep kids in. So we're expanding our ERI program to the middle school level. We got a lot of good dividends out of that at the elementary level. And right now, I think as we hit the wall last year, it's difficult to predict what's down the road in regards to evaluations and what those evaluations are going to turn out to. So some of that stuff was supplies, some of those things were basics, but we tried to keep her as steady as possible. Her voice was pretty loud throughout these meetings, just knowing what we've anticipated last year. We had a year's worth of data and what we saw happened in June, July, August in regards to more kids coming in.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think it's really important that we are continuing to invest in special services. So I do want to commend the superintendent and Mr. Servels. Is that what you said? So I really appreciate that because I want to make sure we're continuing to invest in students who have higher needs. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously, it's one of our biggest expense lines, so she had a really loud voice. Not literally, but she had a pretty powerful voice during the construction of the budget.
Okay, follow. I think we have a couple follow-up questions, a few of them.
Okay.
Fine. We'll go this way.
Rock, paper,
Board Member
scissors.
Callahan first.
Okay. I just want to pivot back. Paul stole my special education question. So thank you, board member Stefan. I'm going to pivot back to healthcare for a minute, though. I think Superintendent Bing, you had mentioned that we had joined other districts in making this shift away from the state plan. And so you'd said maybe we're kind of like working with those districts a bit. If so, is there an opportunity to maybe benchmark our costs against some of those comparable districts, just as we're trying to start anticipating what it could look like in future months? Is there information that you have been getting from those conversations that would kind of help close the gap in our kind of understanding as we navigate this in the first few months?
Yeah, a few of our districts have been in the exact program that we're currently in, like Livingston and Bloomfield. So we're able to really look at what their costs were when they first jumped in the program and to see where they were going. Obviously, costs are unique by district, but this will be the first time that we actually have the opportunity to look at costs. I want to really make that as explicit as possible. In the state plan, you receive no data at all. So one of the positives of being self-insured is you can really get into the data and analyze and perform trends in regards to where you're going. And that's what a good broker does. And we've been pretty lucky with this current broker. She just met with Aska and Somaya because they had some questions about, and Aska and Somaya were very happy with that meeting. She'll continue to do that. But yeah, we'll be sharing a lot of the data moving forward because we have it for the first time.
And Liz, I had that very same question, and that is one of the benefits that we can see is we can benchmark ourselves, again, removing any personally identifying information out, and we can benchmark ourselves. We received a report last week that showed our top 10, the top 10 drug users, not like the prescriptions that were being prescribed to our employees. So we got a listing and we can benchmark that against other people that have that data that's available. So we'll be able to see, how many of our employees are using, I don't want to pick on a weight loss drug, but how many of our employees are using a weight loss drug versus, and what's the percentage of the claims versus other districts that can have that data. And we've been assured that we can benchmark that data, again, removing any personal identifying information and be able to benchmark ourselves. And that's again, it's one of the benefits of looking at and being self-insured and truly knowing what your claims are.
Great, thank you. Board Member Nair.
This is less of a question, just more some statements that I wanted to make. So I
Is
can
it-
do it
so
now or resolution time?
I think statements would be good for the resolution as we're debating the vote.
Okay.
Thank you. Board Member Brown.
Thanks. I want to reiterate that I'm really impressed by your observations, how forward thinking you are, and just how passionate you are about digging into data and the whole budget environment. So thank you so much. Just one question. I know you had mentioned that it sounds like we might hire someone to help us going out to bid for various services. could we include, or I guess I want the district to include legal services within that? Because I don't think we've done RFPs for any of our legal services in recent years.
We haven't done RFP for any of our services in recent years, so we'll come up with a list. We'll share that
Okay.
with the board moving forward. Yeah, the gentleman we're using is one of the, well, is the number one gentleman in the state, very well known. So, yeah, we have a running list.
But I think just, we'll hear this in the readout on Thursday, but part of the reason for hiring is that the legislature has just changed the rules for what we can use our co-ops for. So we can't get certain services unless we have a competent person to go out and find them in a different way for us now.
Yeah, we just entered, brought another co-op on board as well. MUJC formed the co-op, so we have some other opportunities out there as well.
Okay. Board Member Higgins.
Did you almost forget my name? So it is very unnerving to hear about the line items that are as low as they are, but I really appreciate, to Deirdre's point, the responsibility of pointing them out so that we can create long-term planning, shift to proactive, not reactive, such as performance-based RFPs and contracts. That's a really, really great forward-thinking thought. So thinking more immediately of next year, as much as I love planning for the future, when we have been spending more than we're getting, which is clear to me, so now we're doing the due diligence of spending within our means. As it pertains to, let's say, the mental health crisis, the fact that 22% of our students are neurodiverse and just have more specified needs, it would be really helpful to see what this impact is direct to students, student access to resources, like what, a little bit more detail around the reduction. I know that that will happen. And then,
That was actually, were guardrails put in place during this budget. So
that's
that we were
wonderful.
not touching
Okay.
mental health, we're not touching special services, IEP needs. Those guardrails were already in place when we started
that's great.
going through the budget.
And then I know with class sizes that the optimization is happening. So I think that whatever, massaging of the experience of going from a smaller class size to a bigger class size, and therefore, shifting from that will be a little bit of a blunt change, I'm sure, for some. So I think thinking about that and hearing about those plans would be helpful.
Okay, I'm going to go to Board Member Bennett first. And then
One source of savings in this budget, which makes it all work, is that we are going to be spending less money on transportation next year. It's come out that part of that will come from discontinuing pre-K courtesy busing. But, there's another change too with actually, how the schools are scheduled. And I know we're not ready to release the times of what the new start, but we're not ready to release what the new start times would be. But I was wondering if you could say how our changes to busing for K-12 would save money and actually, even improve service.
So at this point, we'll have those times probably by this week, coming end of this week or early next week. When we analyze what we were doing, and you all get the emails, what we found was when Sussex did the routes, they did not put enough time in between our current tiers. So if there was any traffic or pothole or something of that nature, we were getting kids late to school. So one of the first things Sandra did was ride all the routes, but also we made determinations that 30 to 35 minutes between the tiers would prevent the tardiness we were seeing and emails we were receiving. Then we also put guardrails in place, such as not keeping kids on bus for 30 minutes or more, not going cross town. We redid the hazardous routes plan, which we'll be receiving next week, the whole plan. What we did project from those numbers currently, and this could change, at a minimum, a reduction of about 10 buses from the fleet. One of the things we did keep in mind as we were looking at times, and we looked, well, you saw the versions, we had about 9 different versions, I believe. We were looking at New York City trains. We are looking at the early and late schools we currently have. We are looking at sleep research in regards to adolescents and teenagers. We are trying not to make that significant of a change at the elementary level, trying to keep it within 10, 15 minutes. So we'll share that work either end of this week or beginning of next week. But as Frank noted, that is that's some low-hanging fruit to save that amount of money. And as we continue to move forward, we'll continue to explore busing and efficiencies that we can see within the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's going to be an active analysis as we move forward.
Board Member Callahan.
Yeah, so as we've been talking tonight about, the main goal of trying to lower operational costs, talked about the RFP process. And this is one described as an area where not necessarily instructional expenses. I'm just wondering if you could speak to how the bidding process and this expert that we're considering bringing in balances maintaining quality in examples like paraprofessionals, where this is a student-facing service. So how does this expert potentially try to balance the cost savings with ensuring we're trying to maintain quality? Like, what does that look like when they're trying to kind of balance the two pieces?
Jason, I can handle this if you the technical piece of the specifications in terms of, paraprofessionals is a very specific, this person is not going to come in and tell us what that paraprofessional should be doing. And our district will be very much hand in hand with what we think our needs will be for those paraprofessionals. So like if Kathy's going to be the point person for the paraprofessional bid, there's going to be a collaborative working between her and this person that's going to be looking at the bids, but he's going to structure the bid out a certain way saying, we're going to put penalties in for non-performance. We're going to make sure that we're efficiently filling people's schedules. We're going to make sure that we're not just buying bodies, but we're buying a performance. And I don't know that this person's work with a paraprofessional contract exactly, he's not going to supersede what the district believes the paraprofessionals will be using, but there'll be an ongoing dialogue of where we can possibly gain efficiencies in all of these different specs, whether it be paraprofessionals, the custodians, our time and materials vendors that service our boilers, the electricians that come in, to see if we can make those specifications very, very tight, because the specifications that we're using for a number of these services are very much cookie cutter, that, there's a bid spec that goes around that 3 other districts have used, and we just put that one in, and it may not best suit the needs of our district and be as specific to us that's going to give us the exact performance. So we want to dial in the performance that we want, have that mirrored in the spec, and then go out to bid based on that spec.
I do want to just make sure everybody knows we've also explored the non-privatization route. We ran those numbers. We ran those numbers for paras, transportation, custodians, and I forgot what slide it is. I mean, you've seen the health cost slide. It's just not doable for us. We started privatization, I guess, a decade ago. So currently, we did explore other options. It just fiscally was not possible for us moving forward.
All right. Any other questions in this section? All right. Seeing none. Mrs. Cervels, thank you so much for your presentation, and Superintendent Bing. And we're now going to turn to our hearings of individuals and delegations. Thank you for coming in person and joining us online this evening. We value public comment at our board meetings. We cannot engage in a dialogue with you. However, we take your comments very seriously, and your input will inform our work. Our comment period this evening is limited to 1 hour. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Ask you please begin by stating your name and your town. We have currently 4 online public speaks, but first we have no in-person speaks. So we will first move to our first online public speaks, Bob Lyons. None of the online public speaks members are. All right, we have no online public speaks members available. I apologize, this was a lengthy presentation, but very worthwhile. So we will now move to the action portion of our meeting. We have 4 resolutions, one 3-part and one individual. What I'm going to do is just divide this up briefly. I'm going to first invite a motion to hear Resolution 4932A and B, as well as 4933. That would be everything except for the budget. Do I have a motion? Board Member Bennett, do I have a second? Board Member Steffen, thank you. All right, we are in discussion. So these are the resolutions to appoint Mr. Savels as the interim business administrator and board secretary, as well as approving the organizational appointments related to that role for the balance of this school year and approving the leave of absence for Mr. Moody. Board Member Higgins, keeping in mind that we cannot have discussion on the personnel piece.
Of course. So no offense, Frank, you are wonderful. Thank you for everything, but is there a cap or a ceiling on your services?
Hours,
Is it in the budget?
hours are capped in the contract.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Mr. Carey, would you please call the roll?
Yes.
Board Member Brown,
Yes.
Board Member Callahan,
Yes.
Board Member Higgins,
Yes.
Board Member Padian,
Yes.
Board President Meyer,
Yes.
Board Member Nayar,
Yes.
Sackett Gable,
Yes.
Board Member Steffen.
Yes.
Motion passed.
All right, very good. And now I'll entertain a motion to take on and consider Resolution 4932C, the 26-27 school year preliminary budget. Do I have a motion? Board Member Callahan and second Nair. And we're in discussion. Board Member Nair.
I just had a few things that I wanted to note. So I've been working quite closely with Frank since he started, and I really want to say thank you so much for jumping in and taking the reins of this budget. I also want to thank the members of the BA's office, Mr. Moody, who's on leave, and Ms. Rana, who's been working very closely with Frank and Mr. Moody on pulling all these aspects of the budget together, and of course, the senior leadership team and all the other members across the buildings who've helped get us to this point. You mentioned this at the beginning, Mr. Bing, the process has been less than ideal given this crunched timeline that we have. And really, we haven't had a chance to get much public input up until this point. But I do understand that from this point till we adopt the final budget, there will be opportunities for clearer documentation of the details to the board as well as to the public before we adopt the final budget. So, sorry, a few town halls, okay? As a board, there are a couple of things I think we can talk about, not at this meeting, not necessarily at the next one, but I do think we should put on the table for further discussion. And the first I would say really is just kind of debriefing on the budget process itself, how it's gone this year and the past year, so we can kind of come up with a standardized timeline and a standardized set of documents that should be produced by the administration for the members of the board, FFT, as well as the public, so that there is clarity in the type of analysis that's being requested and it is consistent year over year. So we're not inundating the district with a bunch of questions, and there is clarity and transparency in what we're asking for. So I would like to propose that at a future board meeting, we consider putting something like that together to make the process smoother going forward in future years. I do think at another board meeting, we really should delve into our capital projects. What has been completed as part of the 2019 resolution, what's remaining, what's the status of those projects, how much money is left in the bond proceeds, because to the point that Frank made earlier, we do, as you all know, we have aging facilities and never enough money to get everything done, and we have priorities. So I do think we should spend another board meeting talking about that. As far as this budget is concerned, I do think that there are certain things that as a board, we should continue to sort of oversee, and it may not necessarily be in the next 4 weeks, but as we kind of finalize the budget, we should just think about certain things such as the transportation plan, which is being proposed, and once it's finalized, we really should ensure that it's pressure tested so that the savings are actually realized and we don't run into a situation where the school year starts and all of a sudden we need new routes and then, costs go up. I would, as I said, love to get public feedback on aspects of the budget, as well as certain things that might impact families like school start time and things like that. I do think it's important, to Meredith's point, to understand what aspects of this budget proposal might adversely impact students and families, particularly with respect to instructional effectiveness and school climate, especially as we're sort of thinking about optimizing class sizes, transferring staff. How does that impact school climate, and how are we going to mitigate against the negative impacts of that? I do think we should have a discussion around that. I do want to understand how we will guarantee appropriate oversight of the new contracted services as a board. And again, this can be something we kind of standardize so that we're not kind of asking the same questions over and over again. And then two points around staff transfers, I really would like to understand, and I think the board should understand how this is going to be communicated in a timely manner to the staff so that they have enough time to prepare their classroom and their coursework. And then finally, I think we talked about health costs, which is one of the big drivers of cost increase this year. It's not really a question. I think we do have to keep an eye on what billings and claims come in. And then if they do exceed what we've budgeted, a discussion around what are our alternatives, or do we get to go back to the state plan or what have you? And so that's something we should really keep an eye on. So
I would also recommend we bring the broker in to maybe every other FFT meeting,
Mhm.
similar to what we do with CPAC. You know, we bring them in for the first 10 minutes.
Yeah. But in order to get to the final adoption of the budget, I do want to propose as FFT chair a set of analysis that I think the district should be able to produce. And I think I can work directly with the team to kind of, and the board to kind of, hone in on what that is and put that forth so we can have more robust discussions around certain aspects that have been brought up at this board meeting. Thank you.
Any other comments? Board Member Bennett.
Thank you. I just want to riff on actually what a few other board members said. I agree very much with Board Member Nayar about the need to talk about our capital projects. And I also want to, reiterate what Board Member Higgins said about all the hard work that went into this budget. Amani Mooney's not here tonight, but, he did a very good job, I think, on transitioning us from the state health plan to self-insurance. He did that very quickly. He explained things pretty well. And, this budget, this tax season is not worse than it is because we did make that big change. I wanted to make a informational point about state aid. When, people in education in New Jersey, superintendents, school boards, journalists, members of the legislature, when they talk about state aid, they almost always mean, K-12 formula aid, of which we're getting a bit under $12 million next year. Sometimes, like we talk about extraordinary aid, pre-K aid, and debt servicing aid. But, there's a very big stream of aid that we almost never talk about, and that goes back, many decades, actually. Like the Education Law Center doesn't talk about it, the Garden State Coalition of Schools doesn't talk about it. And that's like the state spending for TPAF, post-retirement healthcare, disability insurance, and teacher social security. According to the most recent audit we have, we're actually getting about $33 million for those four lines, TPAF, post-retirement medical, social security, and disability insurance. So, the amount of money we get in the indirect state aid, which is considered off budget, is basically 3 times bigger than our K-12 formula aid. Riffing on that, I want to reiterate that there's really no straightforward amount for what the district's budget is. Mr. Corbell has at one point, one line, which is the general fund, that's about $175 million. Another line, total appropriations, is $200 million. If you were to include the state's payments on our behalf, it would be like another $30 million. And, likewise, there are different amounts which are equally correct for what our spending per student is. So that's about all. I just wanted to say, think of indirect state aid too. Thank you very much.
Any further comments? Board Member Higgins.
Sorry, it's a small one. With the maximum travel expenditure, with the 200,000, I was just curious if if that's been reduced, raised, like what was it prior? Or is it just a set every year? I think we set it, that maximum.
Sorry, where are you referencing?
It's in 4932C.
So it has to be, in order for us to submit it to the county, we have to put maximum.
Okay.
This is the same figure that appeared last year. We can run an analysis. I don't think we spend anywhere near close.
Oh, no. More
But it's-
just curious if it was up, down, or the same, just because I was not here last year.
Exact budget figure that was in there last year.
Great, thank you.
Board Member Stefan.
I just wanted to highlight, obviously, this is not a fun budget to be voting on, but there were alternatives that have been discussed over the past several months that, the district has been able to avoid. There was discussion of eliminating courtesy busing K to 5. Courtesy busing is continuing this upcoming year. There was discussion about having to amend our policy to allow for larger class sizes. We're not going to have to amend our policy, and I really recognize Board Member Higgins for her relentless advocacy on that. And one thing that was in the presentation, but I just want to highlight, is that there's a tightening up of our procedures in terms of paying vendors and making sure that there's purchase orders for payments. It sounds like a basic thing, but I think it reflects the district's commitment to making sure we're really watching every dollar that goes out the door. So as much as there's some really unfortunate pieces of this budget, I think we do need to recognize a lot of really good work has gone into this to make really smart decisions as best we can.
Thank you. I'll just go ahead and echo that. I was thinking about that earlier today. Really, I've heard a lot of different times over the past couple of weeks that a budget is a moral document, right? Showing what you prioritize. And that's hard to see when you're looking at the, areas of reduction, but the invisible win here are the number of things that are not on the table tonight. The things, you scratch the surface as far as things that could have been on the table and that unfortunately other districts in much tougher situations than us have had to do. I have seen the district working late hours, long time. Unfortunately, this budget really isn't coming in at the time frame that we would ideally like to see, but they have gotten us to this position through a tremendous amount of hard work. And every day, the news has been better and better as far as things that we are not having to take tough decisions on. So, kudos on that. And hopefully over the next month and change before our final budget, we're going to see some additional wins. Board Member Capadia.
We'll build on your point a little bit, Will, and expand as well. That's redundant. I'm heartened to see a genuine effort to minimize staffing impacts. I really mean that, particularly those that are closest to the students, our teachers. One thing I do want to point out, though, is that when you look at budget line items, and we've heard it here tonight in scattered amounts, is that transportation does stand out to me. And I appreciate Superintendent Bing's attention towards transportation improvements. To be blunt, and we've heard the negative impacts this year, it's bloated and inefficient. So I'd like to see maximum effort toward transportation improvements, both short-term and long-term, before we land on any teacher RIFs. Teacher RIFs should be a last resort, especially when you look at the amount that we're considering. But what I see tonight, and Will, you had mentioned of the work that's been put in, but what I see tonight are proposed cuts to make a budget work for this year only, not a restructure for long-term sustainability. A restructure that gets us out of freezes and more and move us toward actual investment in our districts across academics, arts, athletics, and our aging infrastructure, which is directly connected to a strategy to replenish our reserves. We must break the habit of using reserves to balance a budget, especially when we look at 27 and 28, where if anyone looks ahead in this preliminary budget, 2028 looks bleaker if we don't start putting structural changes now. So we will be in those spots where the other districts are this year. We're just postponing it.
Any other comments?
I do want to just put it, what Bimmel just said in an echo chamber in regards to student achievement. We made a commitment to focus on student achievement. I don't think I mentioned it once in this budget. So I just think collectively we need to refocus on the idea of that student achievement piece.
Mm-hmm. Board Member Brown.
Thank you. I'm actually going to expand upon what Board Member Capadia said. I do agree with Board Member Nair on a number of things for the near term, that we need in terms of getting towards final budget approval. And I want to proactively thank Frank and Mr. Bing and the whole department for your continued hard work as you do move to gather more firm data to finalize the budget. But again, thinking towards the longer term, I am deeply and I know you are too, concerned about our financial trajectory. I completely agree that fundamental changes are needed if we have any chance of operating consistently within our revenues. We need a strategic, long-term plan that prioritizes student learning and moves the district back into the black so that we can rebuild our reserves and invest in our infrastructure as well as bring in services in-house. We cannot bring those in-house. That takes initial investment. So whether that's buying buses, bringing paras in-house, we can't be budgeting the way we're budgeting now if we want to do that. So I guess what I'm saying is, once this budget is refined and finalized, which I know requires a lot more hard work, but once that's done in May, I really urge us all to keep our eye on starting to explore and make fundamental operational changes. We cannot keep operating within our current structure. It is not sustainable, and it's going to take teamwork, and it's going to take a lot of hard choices.
I also think we need to leverage our transparency using our website. We just had a partnership with a company that's able to do our fiscal dashboards as we move forward. So that is something I think we need to really focus on just to keep us accountable as we're moving forward. But yep, I agree.
Any further comments? Okay, hearing none. Oh, I see. All right. No, all right. Are we, so we are not streaming to the community?
We
Oh, can they hear us?
yes.
Well, all right.
Do you know when?
I'm gonna propose we move forward and we can report out what our vote was. So, Mr. Carrick, can you use I was gonna say use the microphone, but now there's no one online to hear you. So will you please take the roll?
Board Member Stefan.
Yes.
Sackett Gable.
Yes.
Board Member Nyla.
Yes.
Board President Meyer.
Yes.
Board Member Kapadia.
Yes.
Yes.
Captain May.
Yes.
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 Excellent. We now will move to, this is the end of the action portion of our meeting. We will now move to our second hearing of delegations and individuals this evening. I do not see anyone else online. I can see a show of hands. Is there anyone who wants to come up? You guys have been here the whole time. Nothing to say? Then I'm going to close our second hearing of individuals and delegations. Do we have any new business this evening? No, we do not. The board will meet again in public session in just 2 days, Thursday, March 26th, 2025 at 6:30, where action will be taken. Reminder, we do have our next two strategic planning sessions coming up, April 15 and May 11th. If you're interested in joining, please go to the website. And I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Board Member Callahan, I have a second. Board Member Sackett Gable, all in favor? Show of hands. All right, this meeting is adjourned at 9:57 p.m. Have a good evening.
Good night.